All right, let's go back to our story. I want to give you a sense of these particular channels so that this afternoon when I go through your individual designs that you have a way of grasping them. Let's begin over here in the lower side, on the lower left here, and in dealing with what we know of as the 15.5, the channel of the flow. Already talked about how important the 15 is. Now, something to think about. Anybody here have the 15th gate? Okay, the four of you. One of the things to realize is, and handle, you're the glue in a group. You got 5 people together, you're in a group together, you're the only one with the 15. If you get up and go, it's all over. It'll all fall apart. I mean, that's literally what happens. So it's really, again, it's something to grasp. When you know these things, it's really interesting to be able to realize what kind of influence you have or not in any of these group situations. So if you have the 15, you're glue. In other words, you're bringing the strength of that group aura together. So these are powerful forces. I mean, you see that in my son Loki, who's a 15.5. There's this pull that you could just pull people in because this is just the way that it works. And of course, if you go away, if you pull out all of that force that's holding everything together. The bottom part of this is interesting, though, the 5. The 5 is one of those incredible gates in human design because it's universal. It sets the patterns for life. And it's really about culture, but it's more than about culture. Interesting about this side in the home. Remember, everything on the far left is all about the inner life, whether it's in the office as an example or at home. It really is about the dynamics of home life. Now, the interesting thing about the 15.5 is that if you have both, then you're going to have an incredibly tidy house. Think about this for a moment now. You're a family, and the 15.5 is in the family. You're going to have an incredibly tidy house. However, the person who has the 15.5 isn't the one who's going to be tidy. I mean, if you've got a child who's a 15.5, hire a maid. Because they're going to insist by their aura being present that the house has to be immaculate and tidy. One of those funny things to think about. So think about what happens if you're a 15.5 and you go into somebody's house and it's a mess. Are you ever going to make them feel bad? No, really, you're really going to make them feel bad. They're going to have this, oh my God, look, they saw everything, And before that person came in, they didn't even pay any attention to it. Okay, now the 5 is about the inner culture of the house. And it's really about how everybody lives together in the house. If you don't have the 5, nobody really knows how to live together. They just don't. It's the same kind of thing on the other side where you get this harmony that comes in. Here, this is a different kind of harmony that arises. In other words, it's about how you're all going to live together. Now, the family culture is going to be about things like, is the house full of people that are swearing all the time? There's all these various things that come into it in terms of how everybody behaves within the household, the way in which all of that operates. Now, obviously, if you don't have that, this is a family that's always going to be looking at that as a problem. Remember that. If you look at any family penta, the most important thing to see is what's missing, because this is what's screwing up that family. Because what happens to any group is that what's missing becomes the biggest theme for them. They forget everything else, and everything gets focused on that theme. That theme becomes the essential problem in the family. So, if you don't have this culture in the family where, everybody isn't doing things in a way that is correct for all of them, this kind of stuff, it's going to be a huge problem. They're constantly going to be trying to establish rules for the way things are done. And, you've got to be like this. And, you've got behavioral rules and all kinds of things that are going to come into it. When you go above that, then you get into something that's totally different, because the moment that you go above the G center, you get into roles of responsibility. Remember that if you have activation above, you get more control in the Penta. If your activation is below, you get managed. Right? And it's always like that. So that example of the 15.5 being in the household, and the household has to be cleaned, you're going to end up having to manage that 15.5 anyway and tell them to, throw their stuff in the laundry and do this and do that, even though they're creating the energy for cleaning the house. And I use cleanliness because it is, Penta is so strange to me sometimes. This is one of the most important things in Penta, is hygiene. I mean, it's built into this 5. It's built into the way it works. The fact is that the clean house is going to produce healthier children. It's just one of those things. I mean, it's just about that. And it is built into every Penta. I mean, Pentas are if you go into an office, group of people, a startup, you got 4 or 5 people, they're in the startup, you walk into the office and the place is a bloody mess. You know that either the 5 or the 15 is missing. And you know right away there's going to be problems there. It tells you right away about the health of the place. And you know that yourself, the feeling that you get when you go into somebody's house and it's dirty. I mean, come on, everybody has that. It's built into us. It just is. And even though on an individual level, those things don't matter. I mean, at the individual level, if it's correct for you to live like a pig, live like a pig. But the moment that you're in a Penta can't stand that. It just can't stand that. So if you've got a 15.5 in your house, you know why all that goes on and has to be dealt with. And if you don't, you got the other side of the story. It becomes the problem. Who's going to clean today? Oh, we've got to clean up today. No 15 or no 5. You got dishes in the sink, until finally you get around and say, okay, today we're going to clean them. If you have a 15.5 in the environment, you can't get away with that. The dishes aren't allowed to stay there for more than 8 or 9 seconds. I mean, everything's got to be dealt with. That piece of dirt on the floor, it's not allowed to have a life of its own. Get it? And this is not us. I mean, this is the joke about Penta. It turns us into the strangest creatures. And here we are busy being clean in order for the Penta to fulfill whatever its mechanism is. God knows what that is, right? Doesn't care about us. Doesn't care about how much time it takes to pick up all those pieces of dirt. Doesn't care. Okay? All right, let me take you to the other side instead. I'll take you over here. The 46 is really beautiful. Okay? The 46 is lovely. The great gate of harmonizing. Now, I say that as facetiously as I possibly can. Because the reality is that the 46 is really devious. I mean, when you see it within the context of Penta, you see a totally different 46. This is no longer pushing up into the kingdom of heaven and serendipity and good luck and blah, blah, blah. All that stuff that you see in the individual design. The moment that you see it in the Penta is, we are family. We're all together. We're all one. We all have to look after each other. We all need each other. We all care about all that stuff. And basically what it does is it harmonizes the direction of the family, and particularly harmonizes the family on the outside. Think about a family that doesn't have anything in discipline up here, where it says administration, and a family that doesn't have anything here in the 46, right? Which is harmonizing. Now, the left side, this side over here, the right side over here, this is all about going out into the world. So think about this family. They go out into the world. There is no harmony. So they don't get along while they're out there at all. And there's no discipline. None. So nobody can be disciplined. So you end up with this horrendous mess. Nothing worse for a Penta than going out with its family and having to demonstrate that their family has problems. Whoa. You do not do this if you're a Penta. Your family is perfect. It is the best family. Everybody gets along. Everybody loves each other. Everybody's working together for the future. And I tell you, the moment, you have that classic scene, you're in the park, there are all these families with their baby carriages and their kids, and they're all doing their Penta thing, and there's some mother or father smacking their kid for doing something. And there is this silence from all these other families. And they're all looking. They failed. They failed. Right? It's powerful that. You make friends with a family that nobody in the family gets along. You have your opinions about that family. About what's going on in there and all of these things. You have to understand, we take so much blame for things personally without ever understanding that it's a larger context that is creating all of this. And if we're aware, we don't have to get caught in that trap. If there's no 46 in your family, accept it. You're not going to get along. Okay? It's okay. You can love members of your family without liking them. You don't have to get along with them. It doesn't mean you have to. But the moment you think you must, that's a totally different thing. It's never going to work anyway, is it? And it's particularly not getting along outside. This family goes outside and they don't get along. That's when they're at their worst. They go to their parents' house to show off their kids, Penta stuff, right? And the kids are outrageous. Nobody's getting up. Problems. It's terribly embarrassing. They have to, go through the suffering of the Penta family. And they do, by the way. It is so bizarre what happens to us because of this kind of construct. Okay, take the 29. The 29 is a way in which everybody can get to learn about life by going outside. Remember that the Penta is about raising children. On the logic side, you raise them on the inside of the house. You have all those things you need. A stable, clean, healthy environment, blah, 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 all that stuff. But when you go over the abstract side is you cannot raise your children in isolation. They need to go out into the world. They need to learn how to cross the street. They need to learn how to handle themselves in certain situations. All of that stuff. This is the family going out into the world together to learn. These are parents taking their children out into the world to experience life out there. Now, if you don't have the 29, it's not there. It's just not there. If you have a family that's a 46-29, they love to go out together. But if you have anybody in that family who doesn't have that, they don't want to be out there. They don't want to be out there at all. And of course, it creates problems. It affects the harmony. It affects the potential of what perhaps the children could learn by being out in the world. It has nothing to do with the respect of what is individual or unique. It's about the way in which we have been conditioned forever by this mechanism. We were all raised in these things. We all were raised according to the limitations that were there. And of course, in that, we all carry our stuff. Every child carries resentment. I wanted to do this, we couldn't do that, we weren't like this, we could have been this. What to do? What to do? This is the whole thing about being unaware. Most rapes, murders, all kinds of things take place in families. Take place with people you know, with people you have in your circle, all of that. Most of the violence that we have in the world is inside the family, not outside, not from strangers. It's inside. And it has nothing to do with the personal nature of the beings. It has to do with the way in which they are distorted through the conditioning. And it's the conditioning that sets those things off, because the Penta, because it's so competitive, because it's so material, is aggressive. It's aggressive. Ultimately, tribes will do whatever it takes to maintain themselves. Okay, let's go to the middle. Capacity, the 14, possession in great measure. As I said, this is one of the most important keys in Penta. Now, the reality is every gap is equal. Whatever you've got missing in a group is going to be the tension point anyway. But when the 14 is missing, it means that the flow, remember the way in which the energy flows, that the flow gets cut off. It doesn't get up to where it needs to get to. It doesn't become part of the energy flow that opens up into, this, opens up into like this triangle, that goes upwards. You need to get this energy up. So if the 2 or the 14 are missing, you don't get this energy to the upper level. And of course, what that means is that you're always going to deal with a family that's always struggling in that sense to fulfill their possibilities. The possibility of the family is always demonstrated through the top, out of the throat, manifested, spoken, however you want to look at that, that's where it has to come out. So the 14 is a key because it really locks in the energy potential of the family or the group. Again, thing to recognize about the presence of the 14. It doesn't mean you're going to be rich. Don't be confused by that. What it does mean is that as a family, you're never going to truly be without. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the Darfur, literally, doesn't matter where you are. It means you'll get by. No matter what, you'll get by. You'll get what you need. Even if it's at a low level of calorie intake that's only available, whatever the case is, you're still going to get more than the next one who doesn't have that. So it's important to understand the 14 brings a real gift. Right? It's the gift of the energy. It's why the 14th gate, for me, when I look at all the gates in the construct of human design, 14th gate for me is deeply, deeply, deeply impressive. It is what locks us into the material world. It is a thing that travels from the individual design to the Penta, to the Wa. It remains a consistent force in our lives. It is about filling the wagon. And when I say that, the ancient description in the original I Ching, possession in great measure, is the story of the wagon, whether the wagon's going to be full, how full, not full, whatever the case may be. But it's about filling up the wagon, the possessions. It's about possessions. It's about materialism. So the moment that the 14 is there, you have a certain guarantee of minimum material requirements. Again, if it doesn't get up to the top, it isn't going to be easy. Again, this is all about finding flow. Now, if you don't have the 14, it doesn't mean you're going to be poor. Again, the other side of the story. But what it does mean is there's never that guarantee. You're going to have to struggle to find whatever you need to get. It's not going to be so easy. It's one of my standing jokes. I'm a 2. I don't have the 14. I have relationships with so many 14s at the business end of my work because it's the thing that makes sense. I bring the vision, they bring the resources, and together we do our job. And it's something to understand about these mechanisms. I don't have the 14. I'm not poor. But at the same time, if you don't have the 14, you're always on. You cannot be off. You always have to be concerned. You always have to be involved. And it's the program that forces that. Before I was in a Penta, I was an incredible freak. None of that mattered. None of that meant anything. The most stunning thing to watch for me from the time that I had my experience was that, from the moment that I began a family, it was so obvious the way the energy was moving, because this is what Penta does to you. Changes your whole focus, changes everything. You know, instead of being this freak, all of a sudden I had to be responsible. And I even have Saturn in irresponsibility. I mean, I'm not designed to be responsible in that way. But this is the program. The program, this is Penta. This is what Penta does to you. And it's really something to grasp. Only when you begin to understand it in that context can you begin to separate between, you know, what happens to you because of the conditioning and who in essence you really are. So you don't lose that. So that you can maintain that for your own decision-making process. When you get to the 2, the other side, the 2 is about vision. Vision. And basically it's about direction. It's about where do you put the money? Where do you put the resources? And you can see that the resources have to go in 3 directions. The main theme of the resources is to go straight up the center. And when you're going straight up the center, this is all about moving the group out into the public domain. I mean, families that have the 8-1, I mean, in individual design, there's a channel of contribution. Families that have the 8-1, these are families that you get tired of seeing. You know? It's like, whenever you see them, they're all together. You know, it's a kind of moving mush puddle. I don't know, whatever it is. They're always together. You know, wherever you go, they're always doing that number. You know, if there's a school thing, their entire tribe shows up to watch their child. You know, this kind of thing. This is real. You know, they've got to show it off. They have to be out there in front of everyone. By the way, they end up being the families that get the most recognition. They just do. And families that get recognition tend to be rich. And all, I mean, you got to understand Penta. Penta isn't interested in poor families. You see any newspaper that's really interested in poor families? They're interested in rich families. Because rich families have always dominated the genetic plane. We're interested in the children of stars and politicians and this and that. What are they going to do? You know, what's this next generation of that great gene pool going to do? Because they, I was going to say bullshitted everybody, propagandized everybody into seeing them as the great family. I mean, in America, it's really cute because they call the president's family the first family. Penta number 1. You know, Penta number 1. And boy, oh boy, are we up here. And no matter how many children they have and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, they're all going to carry that genetic marking on them. See, we're stuck with this Penta stuff. It's hierarchical, it's aggressive, and it's deeply, deeply material. If your family can't be a success, you know, basically the program is saying, we don't need you. We want a good, strong gene pool for the future. And if you can't compete with the other families, sorry. And of course, we know the vast majority of families are just families stuck in the not self and in the misunderstanding and all the things that go with that. But see what Penta does to us. See, so many things about human nature that we want to stuff on the individual. You can't. You can't. It's just the way the program has aligned us so that we can move forward because the program is based on us being a bioform, that the only way in which we are going to operate over time is through reproduction, and the successful capacity of us to be able to raise our children is something that's absolutely essential. In other words, the families that do the best job, who raise their children well, who make a good living, these are the families that the program is promoting. It's what they're promoting. And all the others, with their gaps and their lack of awareness, are all caught in the suffering. They just are. You know, unfortunately for planet Earth and for what it is to be in the homogenized world, absolutely everything is a hierarchy. Always. There are always going to be those families that are at the top of the hierarchy, and there are always going to be those at the bottom. I mean, this is the nature of the world, and it's all controlled by Penta. And it's only interested in dominant families. It's not interested in anything else. It's the thing that's spooky about it, you know. And in that you can see our history. I mean, speaking of history, if you look at most of the history that was written until the 18th century, it's only about leading families. It isn't about anything else. We know more about leading families from 2,000 years ago than we possibly know about any ordinary human being. And it's only them that has interest for us. You know, this is Penta conditioning. This is Penta propaganda. This is the way that it works. And you see, one of the great threats that has arisen over the last 50 years with the breakdown of the traditional family. Because you see, one of the things that kept Penta so strong was that not only did it have a generation that it was moving forward, but it had a generation that it could rely on. The support generation, the traditions, all of that stuff that was there from the past, which we have lost so much in the way in which the world has evolved. It's rare to see, for example, a 3-generational family living together anymore, unless it's a very elderly parent that's been taken into a household. You know what I mean? We don't do that much anymore. So you don't have this genetic pool and its continuity. The other thing is that we move a lot. And this is new. I mean, after all, this is a phenomena that is really extraordinary. In the United States, 1 out of every 3 people moves every 2 years. Talk about 350 million people population. It's an amazing number of human beings moving. So you have this total breakdown of the traditional base of family power. It's why families have been consistently losing their power over the last 50, 60 years. They just have. You know, we're living in a world in which we don't have the same genetic pool connections. If you grew up in a town where your parents grew up, your grandparents grew up, your great-grandparents grew up, when you go to school the first time, everybody knows who you are. Ah, you come from that family. Yes. I remember your uncle. I remember your, blah, 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 blah. And it's those families with that continuity in place, the tradition that you get on this abstract side above. This is really important. So one of the strengths of family is connecting to its past, which becomes, again, more and more difficult. Normally, this side, it is this journey that they take, going out into the world harmoniously to see their roots, to reconnect with their past, to reconnect with their traditions. Connecting to the traditions is many things. The local culture that you came out of, the religion that you came out of, the various accoutrements that your particular society has, you have from it. All of those things are there to be maintained and brought to the next generation. That what we have in the world today, for example, where you have a whole generation of children in the 60s that broke away from the traditional faiths of their parents. Enormous breakdown in family. The moment that those children broke that tradition, the next thing was the highest divorce rate in history. I mean, really, truly think about that, because they are deeply, deeply connected to each other, right? See, the moment that you break down the tradition is the moment that the basic mechanism in the family begins to be corrupted. It just does. Without a past, without the roots, without a tradition, this is the only way in which the family can keep its strength and its continuity and keep on developing its success. The other thing is that healthy connections transgenerationally help financially. If you have a strong connection with your family and you end up in trouble, or there's a problem, or you need to do something special for a child and you can't really afford it, there is the continuity of your family that says, we will help. Because the grandparent wants the same success for the grandchild as they want for their own. Because within the context of Penta, the grandchild is actually the shining light, because they become the next representative for the next generation that's moving forward. So this continuity with the past, with tradition, is something that is very, very valuable. I mean, again, if you have a family, for example, that doesn't have the 13 that is, doesn't have the accounting in the business chart. Basically, this is a family that has no interest in that. I mean, they have no interest in it. This is the prodigal. No interest in going back and hearing the stories and bringing the stories forward and keeping the stories of the family and the secrets of the family and the treasures of the family. The history seems lost. So the moment you don't have a 13, there isn't any history. In my family, there's no 13. So there's very little known about the other generations. And not because of anything other than that's the way it works in the Penta. It just does. If you're a family and you don't have the 33, you don't want to go see them. You like the traditional stuff, I mean, if you don't have the 33, basically what you say is, take pictures and bring them home and I'll look. Oh, she's changed. You look at the picture. Don't want to see it, Don't want to really be there. I mean, this is something really to grasp. And when you think about that 33rd gate, when you see it in the context of the individual graph, the line of retreat, to be able to go back a generation with your family is meant to be a deeply important thing as a ritual in life. I mean, that's what Penta is all about. Penta is saying, look, all of those things are very important to us. We need to have that continuity. It's why that we have so many difficulties in families now, because of this breakdown in the traditions, because of this breakdown in, it's not the same to see a grandparent once a year. I mean, that is not filling up any of this. Do you know what I mean? It's not the same as going across the street or going to the back of the house, wherever it is. I mean, it's not the same as it used to be where there was that access. You grew up in the same town, your parents are living a couple of blocks away, take your children over. This is something that is easy to do and they have this strong connection and familiarity. Your children get to spend time with an older generation that will tell them their secrets. Will tell them about people that they never got to meet, stories about the family that they never heard, all of that tradition that's there that gives them that continuity of bloodline. Because again, Penta's interested only in that bloodline. If you go to the logic side at the top is different in that it's only concerned with how do we mold everybody into a successful human being. First of all, we need a lot of planning. This is about saying if we have the resources, we need to plan for the future. We need to plan for their education. We need to put money away for them. We need to do all these kinds of things. In other words, there's this whole set of things that can be done for the advancement of the child. And of course, to administer that is the discipline involved. In other words, to be able to raise your children so that they are correct as beings. To be able to give them the guidelines. Again, it's relative because it's the guidelines of your culture and so forth and so on, the way in which, they are intended to act and the way in which they are going to be controlled. It is, again, because of the aggressiveness of the Penta, this particular area can be physically aggressive. I mean, children historically have been beaten a lot. I mean, it's something to grasp, that when you don't have this, when this is open, if nobody in the family has the 31, there is always a potential threat of violence because of an inability to maintain discipline. Again, the only way to deal with that is through awareness. If you don't have that in your family, discipline is done one-on-one. That's all. Again, remember, it's very easy when you're aware to compensate for these things. You don't have to have problems with discipline. The only way you would have problems with discipline is if the whole family is sitting together and you're trying to, give them the rules. Then it doesn't work. Can't work. And nobody's going to pay any attention. But one-on-one's always a different thing. And it's the only way in which you can really do that. And it's a way of avoiding the problem. Because remember, the not-self family that doesn't have this, that has a gap here, they're always on edge. because there is no discipline. And that means not just simply that the children aren't disciplined, the adults aren't disciplined. You know, they're not doing what's necessary, and they're not being corrected. You know, it's the whole thing gets caught up in that. The other side of that is, the thing to recognize about this administration of the future of the family is what we all got to see, and what is probably one of the most difficult things for a child growing up, is this enormous pressure on what you're going to be. You know, this poor kid's 14 years old. You know, and you're hammering into them, well, you know, you could be a doctor, you could be this, you could be that, maybe think about this and that. You know, nobody is an adult until they're Arrhenius opposition. Nobody. And it takes time in this life to know what is right for you and to know where to go. It's not possible for children to understand that. It isn't. It truly isn't. You know, what's important for any child as they're growing up is to have the opportunity to do things that they love to do. Because anything you love to do ultimately is going to enrich you. But please understand what this is in the Penta. This is all this pressure on children that they have to be something. It's not just, we're glad that, you know, you're here and you're healthy. You have to be something. I mean, you have to be something. This is tremendous pressure. And of course, this very logical system is also the bedrock of our educational system. So it all gets tied in together. There's all this pressure on children to achieve, and to achieve in school, to do well, so that the family can then go back to their family and say, little Johnny is so smart, he's so terrific, you know, isn't that wonderful? You know, and only for grandma to say, yes, yes, just like my father. You know, it's all down the family bloodline. You know, this is really what it's all about. Okay, and finally the middle here. Implementation. Implementation is really about, where are you going to put the resources? That's really the most important thing. Knowing where to put the resources. How much to put into planning. You don't want to take all the money and put it into planning. You don't want to take all the money and put it into trips so that you can go see grandparents or go to the old country or whatever the case may be. You need to be able to control all of that to implement it correctly. The other thing that's very important for Penta is there in the public relations. And it's all about being the family role model. And this is all about spending money on the family presenting themselves as being a success. Now, basically what that means is, if you don't need a new car, you're still going to get one. You know, it's really at the most mundane level. It's just really, really basic. This is where money goes into pretension. And I say, I don't, you know, that's not totally fair. Because again, for a Penta, it's simply there to demonstrate, look, we're doing well. We're doing terrific. You know? And the family is always spending money on showing that they're terrific. And they do that in many ways. The clothes they buy their children, the things that, you know, all of this stuff, the house that they live in, the car that they drive, the furniture that they have, it goes on and on and on. You know, if you're one of these families, you need to make sure that, I have a friend of mine who's in a family and doesn't have the 8-1. And their house looked like, from the outside, a deteriorating toilet, without being rude. They would never do anything about it. I mean, absolutely no way. Very nice on the inside, but I wouldn't do anything about it. Now, an 8-1 family, they would rather have the inside of the house empty and the outside looking terrific. Because God forbid any car should drive by and see that house and it's not perfect. Because they're into demonstrating. We're a success. We got it all together. We're the, you know, blah, 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 all of that stuff. This is the family that when their child is going to get married, they take out huge announcements in the newspaper, have a wedding that they cannot afford, all of that stuff in order to demonstrate, look at us, what a family, what a gene pool, what a success story. These children are going to be, and on and on and on. See, when you came in here this morning, I really thought all those things were personal. It's just people. It's just the way we are and what we do. It's not true. Conditioning is the most incredible thing. It's the one thing that has, fascinated me, enthralled me in many ways throughout my entire process. All I've ever taught, in fact, is about conditioning, because this is what the Maya is. And when you're looking at Penta, you're looking at the foot soldier of the Maya. This is what Penta is. It serves the Maya. It serves the program. It has nothing to do with individuals. Nothing. It only has to do with these biological mechanisms to maintain the success of our species and to keep us reproducing and to keep us on a controlled track. Something to think about over lunch. And by the way, don't sit 3 at a table. And it's one of the things to do. It's when I was, my teaching with my BG5 students, I always said the same thing, same with family practice. You have to see Penta to understand it's real. You have to see it to understand it's real. And the moment you start taking this in, you can begin to see it. Next time, when you're sitting in a restaurant, in a cafe, look around you, check out the tables. Check out the difference between the frequency at a 4 table and a 3 table. Look at a 5 table. Somebody always gets up. Always. Somebody always getting up. 5 tables, you always think there's a bladder problem. Because at a 5 table, there's always somebody getting up. Oh, I got to go to the bathroom. And they're gone. Sometimes they don't even come back,